their belief. When Christianity did arrive, around AD 1000, it came in two different forms, Latin and Greek, creating the first of the region's many religious fissures. Islam arrived a few centuries later, spread by invading Ottoman Turks and Tatars. By 1492, the whole Balkan Peninsula belonged to the Dar al-Islam, and mosques could, and still can, be found as far north as Vilnius in Lithuania. That same year, when Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain expelled their kingdom's Jews, the last in a long series of such banishments from the Christian nations of the West, the Ottoman Empire invited them to settle in its greatest cities. By then, the East was the cradle of European Jewry. As Western European countries expelled their Jews one after another, Eastern European kingdoms welcomed them in. For much of its history, Eastern Europe was a frontier society, pushing into territories that had been previously uncultivated or that had been depopulated by long-running frontier wars. Multiple waves of settlement gave much of it a character quite unlike Western Europe, or most of Russia for that matter. In Eastern Europe, it was common to see Catholic and Orthodox Christians living in close proximity with Jews and Muslims. This overlapping of multiple religions made it hard to enforce the dogma of any individual faith. Eastern Europe thus became a haven for religious misfits and heretics. Groups such as the Bogomils, Hussites, Frankists, and Alevis left a deep imprint on the region's culture. So did a welter of magicians, alchemists, and occultists, whose combined presence made Eastern Europe the continent's premier training ground for the dark arts. Today, most of the Jews are gone, and the Islamic presence is much diminished. Working alchemists are even harder to find. Still, in many places, it is possible to feel the weight of their legacies. For years, I've traveled everywhere from the Sufi shrines of Dobruja in Romania to the last wooden synagogues of Samogitsia in Lithuania, in search of traces of this vanishing religious plurality. For me, this was a personal quest. My family background, half Jewish and half Catholic, encapsulates a fragment of this past diversity. This book is not a family history, but my family's history forms a braid running throughout it. The Polish poet Czesław Miłosz wrote that awareness of one's origins is like an anchor line plunged into the deep, without which historical intuition is virtually impossible. And so it is for me. My ancestors are at the root of everything I write. As a member of a very small community of Polish-speaking Jews, I was born into a culture that has all but disappeared. This was the world of the secular Jewish intelligentsia, who were passionately attached to Poland's literary heritage, but wary of its marriage of Catholicism and nationalism. Their idols were poets and short story writers, rather than generals or saints. And their bookshelves were packed with the yellowed spines of émigré journals sent from Paris. But this is only half of my family's story. The other, Christian half, was made up of competing strands, divided by class and trade. Some were peasants and some were craftspeople. A few were even aristocrats, and worked as servants to kings. Even though these ancestors had roots in places as disparate as Hungary, Lithuania, Germany, and the Czech lands, all of them considered themselves to be Poles. The process by which this collective awareness was forged took centuries. The defining cleavages in my family were between Jew and Christian, commoner and noble, Pole and non-Pole. These were all symptoms of a single overarching pattern. To a degree unknown in much of the rest of the world, in Eastern Europe, religion, ethnicity, and class all worked together to delineate boundaries of profession and caste. It was common for landowners, tenants, and townspeople to all speak different languages and belong to different faiths. Because of this, people could live side by side and yet belong to completely different social worlds. Neighbors stayed strangers so long as old taboos remained in force. These patterns of exclusion and animosity combined to create a world of incredible variety. No matter its size, no community in Eastern Europe was ever unmixed or pure. Even in the smallest village, a 10-minute walk might take you past temples devoted to 3 different religions, whose priests all spoke in different tongues. If you were to spend any time on the road, you might encounter whole different sets of languages and beliefs, belonging to the region's numerous nomads, itinerant salesmen, and other professional wanderers. For centuries, the traditional societies of Eastern Europe most often resembled a multicolored tapestry. Diversity was not a byproduct of this system.